Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was the first Teen Titan to rise above the Justice League. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was a symphony of destruction, and Izuku Midoriya was its unwilling conductor. He was pain and light and screaming wind. One for all, a power meant to be a torch passed through generations, was now a nova contained within the frail vessel of his teenage body. It thrummed under his skin, a glorious, agonizing chorus of 9 voices, 9 wills, all focused on a single, desperate purpose. Every muscle fiber was a guitar string pulled past its breaking point, vibrating with an energy that threatened to tear him apart from the inside out. Opposite him, the epicenter of the cataclysm, was Tamura Shigaraki. Or what was left of him. He was a cancerous god, a living embodiment of decay and stolen power, the malevolent will of all for one wearing a new, more perfect face. The ground around him was a dead, gray wasteland, disintegrating into dust that choked the air. Dozens of quirks swirled around him like a shroud of phantom limbs, a chaotic arsenal ready to be unleashed. It's over, ninth! The voice echoed, a dissonant chord of Shigaraki's rasp and all for one's baritone. This world is a failed experiment. Give me one for all, and I will finally press reset. Never! Izuku roared, his own voice raw and torn. Green lightning, so dense it was almost liquid, arced from his body, scorching the air and leaving the scent of ozone and impossible power in its wake. He could feel the vestiges within him, a council of ghosts roaring their defiance. He's pushing his decay through the ground. Float, ninth! Nana Shimura's voice was a sharp, urgent command in his mind. He obeyed without thought, rocketing into the air. Below him, a wave of gray annihilation swept across the cratered battlefield. He saw his friends, his precious, irreplaceable friends, fighting with everything they had. Uraraka, her face grim with determination, touched debris to make it weightless, creating a floating shield wall. Ida's engines flared blue, a streak of armor pulling a wounded hero from the path of destruction. Todoroki's ice and fire clashed in brilliant, steaming displays, a desperate attempt to contain the creeping death. And Bakugo. Katsuki Bakugo was a relentless explosion, a force of nature meeting an apocalypse. He wasn't just fighting, he was screaming a promise across the battlefield with every blast. A promise that Deku wouldn't have to carry this burden alone. But in this moment, at the heart of the storm, he was. You can't save them, Shigaraki all for one sneered, launching himself upward on jets of stolen energy. The more you try to hold on, the more will slip through your fingers, just like your precious master. The taunt hit its mark, a shard of ice in the furnace of Izuku's heart. He saw All Might's emaciated form, his inextinguishable smile. I have to end this. For him. For everyone. Now, Izuku. The voice of the first user, Yoichi Shigaraki, was a solemn whisper. All of it. Don't hold back. This was it. The final gamble. The full, untamed, reality-breaking power of 9 generations of accumulated strength. He drew it all in. Black Whip erupted from his arms, not as tendrils, but as a crackling cage of dark energy. Fa Gene coiled in his legs, storing kinetic energy until his bones creaked. Danger Sense was a deafening siren, screaming at the sheer wrongness of what was about to happen. He pulled his fist back. The world seemed to slow, the green energy of one for all condensing around his arm until it shone with the brilliance of a newborn star. Shigaraki mirrored him, his own arms swelling with a monstrous amalgamation of power-enhancing quirks, wreathed in the purple-black aura of All for One. They were 2 singularities, 2 impossible forces on a collision course, united. Izuku screamed, his voice breaking under the strain. States of. Shigaraki's voice was a triumphant roar. Smash! They bellowed in unison. The impact was not a sound. It was the absence of it. A perfect, deafening silence as reality fractured. The green light of accumulated hope and the purple darkness of stolen ambition met, and they did not merely cancel each other out. They reacted. A tear appeared in the space between their fists. It was not a hole into blackness, but a kaleidoscopic wound bleeding colors that had no names. The laws of physics groaned, and then snapped. The sky warped, twisting like fabric. Izuku felt a pull, an inexorable tide dragging him not forward or backward, but sideways. His connection to the vestiges flickered like a dying candle. He could feel their panic, their confusion, as they were stretched thin across the dimensional rift. The world dissolved into a smear of light and color. He caught one last, heart-wrenching glimpse of the battlefield. Uraraka's eyes were wide with terror, her hand outstretched. Todoroki's expression was one of horrified disbelief. And Bakugo. Bakugo was shouting his name. Not Deku. Izuku. The name was swallowed by the vortex. The 9 voices in his head went silent. The comforting weight of their presence, the legacy that had defined him, vanished. He was alone. And then, he was nothing at all. Pain was the first herald of his return to consciousness. A dull, comprehensive agony that sang in his bones and screamed in his muscles. The second was the smell. It was a putrid cocktail of damp brick, rotting garbage, and something acridly chemical that stung his nostrils. It was the smell of a city, but not his city. Izuku's eyes fluttered open. The sky above was a sliver of bruised twilight, framed by the towering, grime-streaked walls of an alleyway. A single, unfamiliar star winked at him. He tried to push himself up, and a jolt of agony shot through his right arm, a blinding white-hot flash that made him gasp. He looked down. His costume, his second skin, was in tatters. The armored plates were cracked and splintered. The green fabric was ripped and stained with blood and soot. His right arm was a grotesque mess, the bones clearly shattered, bent at an angle that defied nature. The rest of his body wasn't much better. He felt the grating of broken ribs with every shallow breath. Panic, cold and sharp, began to cut through the fog of pain. Where am I? What happened? Uraraka? Ida? Kaken? He reached inward, searching for that familiar, comforting presence. The warm glow of One for All. The silent council of the vestiges. He found an echo. A void. No. Not a void. The power was there. He could feel it, a wild, untamed current buzzing beneath his skin. But it was disconnected. It was like holding a phone with no signal. The device was functional, but its network, its entire world of connections, was gone. First? Nana? All Might? Can you hear me? Only silence answered. An empty, terrifying silence that felt heavier than any mountain. He had never been truly alone since inheriting One for All. Now, the solitude was a physical weight crushing his chest. He gritted his teeth, forcing down the wave of despair. Analyze. Don't panic. First, assess the situation. It was a mantra, a piece of the hero he was trying to be. He was in an alley. The architecture was different, more glass and steel, less of the familiar Japanese design. The distant sounds of traffic were wrong, the horns a different pitch, the sirens a different cadence. He pushed himself into a sitting position, leaning against the cold, damp brick wall. The effort left him dizzy and nauseous. He looked at his hands. The scars were there, a road map of his journey. But the green lightning that usually danced around him when he accessed OFA was behaving erratically. It flickered weakly around his fingers, a sickly emerald color, spitting and popping like faulty wiring before vanishing. It felt unstable. Alien, as if the power itself didn't know what to do in this new place. He was lost. He was critically injured. His quirk was malfunctioning. And he was utterly, completely alone. For the first time since that day on the beach with All Might, Izuku Midoriya felt truly, hopelessly quirkless. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. A noise from the mouth of the alley jolted him from his spiraling thoughts. Voices, harsh, guttural, speaking a language he recognized as English from his school lessons, but with a sharp, aggressive accent he couldn't place. Just hand over the purse, lady. It ain't gotta get ugly. Please, I have nothing. Just let me go. A woman's voice pleaded, high and thin with fear. Izuku's head snapped up. His hero training, the very core of his being, overrode every instinct for self-preservation. Someone was in trouble. It didn't matter where he was, or how hurt he was. That was a variable that never changed. He staggered to his feet, using the wall for support. Every movement was a fresh wave of agony. He bit down on his lip, drawing blood, and shuffled towards the alley's entrance, peering around the corner. The scene was depressingly familiar. A woman in a business suit was pressed against a wall by a large, brutish man. But there was a key difference. The man's knuckles were glowing with a faint, pulsing orange light. A metahuman, then. The local term for someone with a quirk. The man's patience snapped. Fine. Have it your way. He drew his glowing fist back. Time seemed to slow for Izuku. He saw the woman's eyes widen in terror. He saw the man's cruel smirk. And he saw the path. His body moved before his brain could protest. He didn't have the strength for a full-power smash. He couldn't risk his arm completely disintegrating. But he didn't need that much. Just a little. A 1% flick, maybe even less. Enough to disarm, not to destroy. He raised his left hand, his index finger and thumb held together. He focused, trying to coax the wild energy of OFA, begging it to listen. He felt a surge, far stronger than he'd intended, rush to his fingertip. It felt less like a controlled flow, and more like a dam breaking. Too much. His mind screamed. Stop, but he was already in motion. Leave her alone, he croaked, his voice barely a whisper. He flicked his finger. The result was not a gentle gust of wind. It was an explosion. The air itself seemed to shatter. A deafening crack echoed through the street, a sound like the sky splitting open. A focused cone of pure force erupted from his finger. It didn't just knock the mother's arm aside, it slammed into him with the force of a freight train. The man was launched across the street, tumbling end over end before crashing into a parked car with a sickening crunch of metal and bone. But the damage didn't stop there. The shockwave from the flick radiated outwards. The pavement beneath his feet buckled and cracked, a spider web of fissures spreading out from where he stood. The windows of the storefronts across the street exploded into a shower of glittering shards. The parked car the mugger hit was dented into a U-shape, its alarm beginning to shriek a piercing, cyclical wail. The entire street fell silent, save for the car alarm and the faint tinkling of falling glass. The woman he'd saved wasn't looking at him with gratitude. She was staring with wide-eyed terror, her gaze fixed not on her downed assailant, but on the small, battered teenager who had just unleashed a terrifyingly casual display of destructive power. She scrambled to her feet and fled, her heels clicking rapidly on the broken pavement. Izuku stared at his trembling finger. Green sparks still spat from the tip. He hadn't meant to do that. He had tried to use the barest minimum, a scalpel, and had ended up wielding a sledgehammer. The control he had spent years painstakingly building, the delicate balance he had achieved with his power, was gone. He was a danger. Here, in this strange, unfamiliar world, he was a walking natural disaster. The weight of it all, the loss, the pain, the fear, the catastrophic failure of his control, crashed down on him at once. His legs, already shaking from the strain, finally gave out. The world swam in his vision, the edges turning dark. He heard the distant, approaching wail of the sirens, their unfamiliar two-tone cry sealing his fate. He was an unknown, an unregistered and dangerously powerful entity. They were coming for him. He collapsed onto the fractured asphalt, the darkness welcoming him like an old friend. Far above the city, in a room devoid of color and light, Raven sat in the calm eye of her own internal hurricane. The world outside was a cacophony of meaningless noise, traffic, shouted conversations, blaring music. It was a sea of chaotic emotional energy that she spent most of her time building walls against. Her mantra was a shield, a focus point in the storm. Azarath. Metrian. Zinthos. The words were a key, locking away the rage, the fear, the despair. Locking away him. Her father. The demon whose blood was a corrupting poison in her veins. Her power was a reflection of him, a doorway to a dimension of pure evil, and she kept it chained with discipline, meditation, and emotional emptiness. Azarath. Metrian. Zinthos. She sought the placid pool of tranquility, the void at her center. She reached for it, her sole self hovering on the precipice of peace. And then the world screamed. It was not a sound her ears could hear. It was a psychic cataclysm, a violent tearing in the emotional fabric of reality. It was as if someone had stabbed a star into the soulscape of the city. Her meditation shattered. The placid pool instantly became a raging whirlpool. Her eyes, hidden beneath her deep blue hood, snapped open. Her room, a sanctuary of quiet gray, was suddenly filled with a phantom light, an empathic afterimage of an event so powerful it had left a scorch mark on the metaphysical plane. She gasped, clutching her chest as a wave of alien emotions washed over her. It was a hurricane. A maelstrom of feelings so potent, so raw, that it nearly overwhelmed her carefully constructed defenses. She felt a profound, soul-deep grief, the sorrow of a world lost. A dizzying, nauseating confusion, the feeling of being an anchor unmoored from the ocean floor. A blinding, searing pain, both physical and spiritual. But beneath it all, burning brighter than anything she had ever felt from another living being, was a core of pure, unadulterated determination. It was not the cold, sharp resolve of Batman, nor the regal, unwavering duty of Wonder Woman. This was different. It was a blazing, self-immolating fire. A will to save, to protect, to sacrifice that was so absolute it was almost a form of madness. It was a light so brilliant it cast its own deep shadows. It felt familiar. Raven stood, her cloak swirling around her like a pool of ink. She was drawn to the source, a psychic beacon in the noisy static of the city. She had felt immense power before. She lived with it. She had sensed the Kryptonian under the yellow sun, the Amazonian forged by gods. This was not the same. Their power felt like a placid ocean, vast and deep. This new power was a supernova, an uncontrolled fusion reaction, a force at war with itself. She felt a strange, unnerving kinship with it. The boy, she could sense it was a boy, was struggling to control a vast, overwhelming power, just as she was. He was fighting to keep his light from consuming him, just as she fought to keep her darkness from escaping. Her curiosity, a dangerous emotion she rarely indulged, won out. She had to see. Her form dissolved into a shadow, a bird of black soul energy that soared from her window, unseen against the night sky. She flew towards the epicenter of the disturbance, the lingering emotional residue guiding her like a trail of breadcrumbs. She found the source in a dilapidated part of the city. The street looked like it had been hit by a localized earthquake. A car was crumpled like a tin can, its alarm still bleeding pathetically. Glass glittered across the pavement. In the center of the destruction, at the mouth of a dark alley, was a figure. She descended, solidifying on the edge of a rooftop, her hooded gaze taking in the scene. A boy, no older than herself, lay unconscious on the ground. He was clad in a bizarre green and black costume that was torn to ribbons, revealing a body that was a tapestry of old scars and fresh, grievous wounds. A faint, flickering emerald energy, like heat haze, shimmered around him. It was the source of the power, she knew. It felt wild, chaotic, and saturated with a kind of noble, tragic energy. The sirens were getting closer. The authorities, the police, and likely SDR labs, would be here soon. They would see a threat. They would see a weapon. They would put him in a cage, run tests, and try to dissect the miracle they could not comprehend. Raven looked down at the boy's face. Even unconscious, slack-jawed and pale, it was a face etched with a fierce, earnest resolve. His brow was furrowed, as if he were still fighting in his dreams. The emotional storm around him had quieted to a low thrum, a mix of exhaustion, pain, and a deep, aching loneliness that resonated with a painful frequency in her own soul. He was a paradox. A being of immense, destructive power, with a spirit that radiated a desperate need to protect. A lighthouse in a storm, powerful and brilliant, but also utterly, terrifyingly alone. She made a decision. The mundane authorities could not be allowed to have him. He was not a problem to be solved or a weapon to be contained. He was something else. Something important. As the first police car screeched around the corner, its red and blue lights painting the scene in stark, flashing colors, Raven pushed off the rooftop. She descended into the alley, a silent shadow moving against the growing light. Her own dark energy, a manifestation of her soul, swirled cautiously around her boots as she landed a few feet from the unconscious boy. She felt his power, now dormant, humming in the air. It felt like standing next to a sleeping volcano. She felt his pain, a quiet echo in her own mind. She reached out a pale, gloved hand, not to touch him, but to hover it over his chest. She closed her eyes, letting her empathy, her most dangerous and precious gift, open a channel. Who are you? She thought, casting the question into the quiet chaos of his mind. She expected nothing. But for a fleeting, impossible instant, she got a reply. Not in words, but in a flash of images, of feelings. A brilliant, smiling man with an impossible physique. A classroom of bright, hopeful faces. A floating girl with kind eyes. A shouting, explosive rival. And a single, powerful, resonant idea, I have to save them. The connection broke. The sirens were deafening now. The police were shouting, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Raven did not hesitate. The shadows around her deepened, coalescing. They flowed over the ground, reaching for the broken boy in the tattered green suit. He was a mystery, a danger, a kindred spirit, and for reasons she couldn't yet fathom, she knew she could not leave him to the mercy of a world that would never understand him. The shadows enveloped him, lifting him gently from the broken ground. As the first officers rounded the corner, guns drawn, they found nothing but an empty, shattered street. The boy, and the shadow that had come for him, were gone. The first thing Izuku Midoriya registered was the absence of pain. A profound, hollow nothingness where a symphony of agony had been. The sharp, grinding protest of his broken ribs was now a dull ache, and the shattered bones in his arm were encased in something cool, hard, and unyielding. He peeled his eyes open. The world was a blinding, antiseptic white. The ceiling was made of interlocking sterile panels, a single, flat light source glowing from its center with a hum so low it was more a vibration in his teeth than a sound. He was on a medical slab, not a bed, covered by a thin, gray, thermally regulated sheet. He tried to sit up, but restraints, soft but unyielding, held his wrists, ankles, and chest in place. Panic, a cold and familiar friend, began to prickle at the edges of his consciousness. He was a prisoner. He took a slow, deliberate breath, forcing the panic down. Analyze. Don't panic. The mantra was a lifeline. He catalogued his surroundings. The room was a perfect cube, the walls seamless and white. There was no door. One wall, he realized, was not a wall at all, but a sheet of transparent material, some kind of advanced polymer, he guessed, not simple glass. Beyond it was a control room, bathed in the cool blue light of holographic displays and monitors. And there was a man. He was a mountain of a man, even sitting down. Broad-shouldered and powerfully built, but the most striking thing about him wasn't his size. It was the metal. The left side of his face was a lattice of gleaming chrome and crimson light, the red eye a multi-lensed camera that whirred softly as it focused on him. His left arm was a complex piece of machinery, pistons and myomer bundles visible beneath its armored shell. He wore a white SDR lab's coat, but it looked ill-fitting and awkward over his partially robotic frame. This, Izuku deduced, was his captor. As if sensing his scrutiny, the man looked up from a data slate. His one human eye was dark and heavy with a weariness that went beyond simple fatigue. It was a deep, soul-crushing exhaustion. Subject is conscious, the man's voice rumbled, a deep baritone that was half human resonance, half synthesized bass. It echoed slightly in the sterile room. He wasn't speaking to Izuku, but to a recorder or a log. Vitals are stable. Cellular regeneration is anomalous. Healing at a rate approximately 600% faster than a baseline human. The foreign energy signature remains potent but has localized, primarily in the musculoskeletal system. Call it biokinetic enhancement energy. He typed something into his slate, the metallic fingers of his left hand clicking with unnerving precision. Who are you? Izuku's voice was a dry rasp. Where am I? The man looked at him, his expression unreadable. The red optic zoomed in, and Izuku had the uncomfortable sensation of being scanned, catalogued, and dissected on a microscopic level. I am Dr. Victor Stone. You are in a secure containment and research facility at SDR Labs, Jump City Branch, he stated flatly. You are here because you leveled half a city block with a finger flick and possess an energy signature unlike anything we have on record. We have questions, Dr. Stone, Izuku thought. He was a scientist. Not a hero, not a villain. A variable. I didn't mean to. My power, it's not working right. Victor scoffed, a humorless, grinding sound. Not working right? Kid, the readings I'm getting off you could power this city for a week. The problem isn't that it's not working. The problem is that your body is tearing itself apart every time you use it. Your arm had 17 distinct fractures. Your ligaments were shredded. By all medical logic, you should be in a body cast for a year, if not permanently crippled. Yet, here you are, mostly healed in under 12 hours. He shook his head, looking back at his slate. It's illogical. Self-destructive. The word stung more than Victor could possibly know. Self-destructive. It's what his own mother had feared, what All Might had warned him about. To hear it spoken so clinically by a stranger in this alien world made his failure feel absolute. It's not supposed to be like this, Izuku whispered, more to himself than to the cyborg. I had control. The vestiges, they're gone. Victor's human eyebrow rose. Vestiges? Izuku clamped his mouth shut. He'd said too much. He couldn't explain one for all, the sacred trust of 9 generations, to a man who saw him as a specimen, a collection of anomalous data points. Look, Izuku said, trying a different tack. I'm not a threat. I help people. That's all I want to do. You helped a woman by nearly demolishing a building and putting a crater in a public street, Victor countered, his tone laced with a bitter irony. Some help. People with power they can't control are a liability. They're dangerous. Trust me, he added, his gaze dropping to his own metallic hand, which he clenched into a fist. I know. In that moment, Izuku saw past the cold scientist. He saw a flicker of the man trapped in the machine. He saw a pain that mirrored his own, the feeling of being betrayed by a body that held a power you never asked for. He was about to say something, to try and connect on that level, when a priority alert flashed across one of Victor's screens. Great, Victor muttered, his attention diverted. HIV. Just what this city needed today. He zoomed in on a security feed showing a chaotic scene at the Jump City Central Bank. Izuku watched the screen, his hero instincts flaring. He saw 3 figures, a tiny man in a high-tech battle suit, a hulking brute of a man, and a young woman with pink hair and black lipstick who seemed to be cackling as misfortune unfolded around her. And fighting them were 2 others. Garfield Logan, currently in the form of a rather large and very green Tyrannosaurus Rex, had thought this would be a great idea. A T-Rex, he'd reasoned, was the perfect combination of intimidating and awesome. Bank robbers would see him, scream, drop their money bags, and he'd be on the 6 o'clock news. Mysterious green T-Rex foils bank heist. He could almost see the headline. The reality was far less glamorous. Get out of the way, you oversized lizard! Yelled Gizmo, zipping around his head in a miniature jetpack. A laser bolt singed the scales on his snout. It didn't hurt, but it smelled like burned reptile, which was deeply unpleasant. The bank lobby was too small. His tail had already taken out a row of teller windows and an unfortunate ficus plant. Mammoth, the big guy, wasn't even scared. He just grinned stupidly and charged, tackling him in the leg. It was like being hit by a wrecking ball. Gar stumbled, roaring in frustration, and nearly fell on top of a screaming cluster of civilians. He was trying. He really was. Ever since he'd run away from the Doom Patrol, from the Chief's endless experiments, and Mento's psychological head games, he'd wanted to prove he could be a hero on his own terms. But on his own terms was apparently turning out to be clumsy, destructive, and generally ineffective. Maybe you should try a less gargantuan form? A new voice suggested. It was melodic, feminine, and had a strange, formal cadence. Gar looked down. Floating near his head was a girl. A very orange girl. She had brilliant green eyes that seemed to glow, long, flowing auburn hair, and was wearing a purple outfit that seemed, well, not from around here. She was, to put it mildly, the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. Whoa, was all he could manage, his T-Rex brain momentarily short-circuiting. My designation is Coriandar of Tamarin, she said, her expression a mix of confusion and righteous anger. You are attempting to stop these criminals? Yeah? I'm Beast Boy. We're the good guys, he said, his voice a deep, rumbling growl. Excellent. Then we shall perform the stopping of them together. She turned her attention to Mammoth, who was winding up for another punch. Her hands lit up with crackling green energy. "Cease your villainy, large person," she unleashed a bolt of energy. It was incredibly powerful, a searing blast of emerald light that sizzled through the air. It was also incredibly inaccurate. It missed Mammoth by a good 10 feet, shot past Scar's head, and vaporized the bank's logo on the far wall. "Whoa! Watch the merchandise!" Gar yelped, shrinking down into a green housefly to avoid another stray blast. "My apologies. My emotional state is turbulent," Starfire called out, her eyes glowing brighter. "This planet is very confusing, and these people are most unkind. This was a disaster." Gar, now a rhino, charged Mammoth, but Jinx, the pink-haired girl, simply pointed a finger at the floor. A patch of marble floor suddenly turned into a slick of oil. Gar's rhino feet went out from under him, and he slid ignominiously across the lobby, crashing into a lone officer's desk. "Having a bad day?" Jinx giggled, her power crackling around her fingertips. They were powerful, Starfire and him, but they were a mess. They had no coordination, no plan. They were just two loose cannons firing in the dark. The HIV trio, on the other hand, worked like a well-oiled machine, their teamwork making them far more effective than the sum of their parts. Gizmo zipped into the open vault. "Score!" Later, stink bombs. They were losing. "Their teamwork is sloppy," Izuku muttered, his eyes glued to the monitor. The restraints felt like a cage, keeping him from where he needed to be. The girl, Starfire, her power seems tied to her emotional state. High output, low accuracy. The boy, Beast Boy, he's versatile, a shapeshifter, but he defaults to brute force forms without considering the environment. They're getting in each other's way. Victor Stone turned from the main console to look at him. His red optic narrowed. "What are you doing?" Analyzing, Izuku said, his brain kicking into its familiar, high-gear hum. "The villains are coordinated. The little one in the suit, Gizmo, is the tech and brains. The big one, Mammoth, is the muscle, a simple tank. The girl, Jinx, is the wild card. Her power seems to be probability manipulation, bad luck hexes. She's the real threat. To beat them, you have to isolate them. Take out the muscle first to demoralize the others, but you have to neutralize the hexcaster at the same time, otherwise any plan you make will fall apart." He was speaking quickly now, the words tumbling out of him in a cascade of tactical observation. It was second nature, as reflexive as breathing. Victor was silent for a long moment, his human eye studying Izuku not as a specimen, but as something else entirely. "You've done this before." It wasn't a question. "Yes," Izuku said simply. On the screen, the battle was turning. Starfire was now locked in a duel with Jinx, her wild starbolts being deflected by waves of pink energy. Beast Boy, now a bear, was trying to get a grip on the surprisingly strong Mammoth. Gizmo was flying out of the vault, his pack loaded with cash boxes. Izuku knew, with a certainty that ached in his soul, that he had to be there. He stopped muttering and looked at his own situation. A containment cell. Energy field. Medical restraints. He couldn't punch his way out. Not without control, not without destroying the entire lab and everyone in it. So, he had to think his way out. He watched the room beyond the glass. He saw the guards, their patrol patterns. He saw the energy conduits running along the ceiling, feeding power to his cell. He saw a small maintenance panel near the floor, just outside the transparent wall. He looked at the humming emitters inside his cell that projected the containment field. And he saw a flaw. It was a tiny detail, something only a paranoid overthinker like him would notice. Every 60 seconds, the lab's primary computer ran a system-wide diagnostic. For a fraction of a second, less than a tenth of a second, power was rerouted from non-essential systems to the diagnostic core. The containment field, deemed essential, was on a backup generator, but there was a switchover. A flicker. An infinitesimal drop in the field's intensity. It wouldn't be enough for a person to walk through, but it might be enough for his power. He focused. He didn't try to summon the raging torrent of one for all. He reached for a single, controlled thread of it. Black Whip. The quirk of the sixth user, Daigoro Banjo. It was more responsive than the raw power of the smash. Come on, He pleaded into the silent void where the vestiges used to be. He felt a flicker of response. A thin, dark tendril of energy, no thicker than a fishing line, snaked out from the back of his hand. It was weak, unstable, but it was there. He timed it. He watched the diagnostic clock on Victor's main screen. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, now. In the split second of the power flicker, he shot the tendril of black whip through the weakened field. It was like pushing his hand through molasses, a strange, tingling resistance, but it went through. The tendril, invisible in the bright light of the lab, shot across the floor and struck the emergency release button on the maintenance panel. An alarm blared. A red light began to flash. The containment field around him flickered and died. The restraints on his body hissed open. Victor spun around, his eyes wide with disbelief. What? How did you? Izuku was already moving. He swung his legs off the slab, his bare feet hitting the cold floor. He was weak, dizzy, and his arm was still in a cast, but adrenaline was a powerful anesthetic. There's no time, he said, his eyes already locked on the exit. They need help. He didn't wait for a response. He ran. He burst out of the lab, following the sounds of chaos echoing from the news feed he'd seen. He was a strange sight, a battered teenager in shredded green pajamas, one arm in a high-tech cast, running with a desperate, world-saving urgency through the pristine corridors of SDR labs. The scene at the bank was even more chaotic up close. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and concrete dust. Civilians were screaming. Police had formed a perimeter, but they were helpless against the metahuman brawl. Izuku skidded to a halt behind a police car, his mind already working, cataloging the scene in real time. Beast Boy was a giant snake, trying to constrict Mammoth, but Jinx kept hexing the pavement under him, causing him to lose his grip. Starfire was flying high, launching powerful but unfocused starbolts, forcing Gizmo to dodge and weave. They were fighting as individuals, not a team. And they were going to lose. He didn't have a costume. He didn't have his full strength. But he had his mind. And he had his voice. He took a deep breath and began to mutter. Okay, high ground advantage is with Starfire, but Gizmo's mobility is superior in tight spaces. Need to limit his movement. Beast Boy has the mass to handle Mammoth, but Jinx's probability field is disrupting his footing. She's the linchpin. If we separate Jinx from Mammoth, Beast Boy can focus. If Starfire can ground Gizmo, his tech is vulnerable. Isolate and eliminate. Yes, that's it. A three-pronged approach. Gizmo, zipping past, heard the stream of rapid-fire analysis. What the crud is that? Who's the muttering nerd in the PJs? Izuku stepped out from behind the car. All eyes, hero and villain alike, turned to him. He ignored the stares, his focus absolute. He looked at the two young heroes who were struggling, who had the power but not the direction. He saw himself in them. He saw the potential. He shouted, his voice cutting through the noise with an authority that surprised even himself. Beast Boy. The green snake turned his head. You can't beat him with grappling. You need to disorient him. Go for something loud, something unexpected. Draw Mammoth's attention and keep it. Beast Boy blinked his snake eyes, then seemed to understand. He uncoiled from Mammoth and, in a flash of green light, transformed into a massive, bellowing silverback gorilla. He beat his chest, producing a deafening boom 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 that shook the very windows. Hey! Ugly! He roared. Mammoth, a simple creature, turned his full attention to the new, loud threat. Starfire! Izuku yelled, pointing at the sky. She looked down at him, her glowing green eyes wide with surprise. He's too fast. Don't aim for him, aim for where he's going to be. Box him in. Use suppressive fire to force him down. A flicker of understanding crossed her face. She stopped launching single, powerful blasts and instead unleashed a flurry of smaller, faster starbolts, creating a cage of green energy in the air around Gizmo. He yelped, his flight path suddenly restricted, and was forced to fly lower and lower to the ground. I'll draw Jinx's fire. Izuku finished, and then he ran. He charged straight towards the pink-haired girl. He wasn't fast, not without FA gene, but he was a target. Jinx, startled by the sudden appearance of this new player, and his effective commands, turned her attention to him. Bad luck for you, weirdo! She sneered, and a wave of crackling pink energy shot towards him. Izuku's danger sense, the one part of his quirk that seemed to be working perfectly, screamed a warning. He didn't have the strength to dodge with speed, so he used his mind. The hex was aimed at him, but it would travel in a straight line. He dropped and slid on the dusty pavement, the wave of energy passing inches over his head. It struck the lamppost behind him, which promptly groaned and fell over, narrowly missing a police car. The plan worked flawlessly. Mammoth, distracted by the gorilla, was a sitting duck. Beast Boy transformed into an ankylosaurus, swinging his massive, clubbed tail and catching the brute squarely in the chest. Mammoth went flying, knocked out cold before he hit the ground. Gizmo, forced to the ground by Starfire's barrage, found his jetpack sputtering as Izuku, sliding past, flicked a loose piece of gravel with just enough force, a tiny, controlled snap of OFA, to jam its intake valve. He crashed to the pavement with a clatter of metal. Jinx was the only one left. She stared in shock as her entire team was dismantled in under 30 seconds. She turned to blast Izuku again, but she was too late. A shadow fell over her. A figure descended from the sky, a being of deep purple and black. It was the cloaked girl from the alley, Raven. Her face was hidden in the shadow of her hood, her eyes glowing a faint, ominous white. "Your chaos ends now," she said, her voice a soft, chilling monotone. Before Jinx could react, Raven's form seemed to dissolve into a massive, bird-shaped construct of pure shadow. The soul self shot forward, passing straight through Jinx. The pink-haired girl's eyes went wide, then rolled back in her head. She collapsed in a heap, unconscious, a faint wisp of black smoke curling away from her. Silence fell. The HIV were defeated. In the SDR Lab's control room, Victor Stone stood frozen, staring at the screen. He had watched the entire thing unfold. He had seen the asset, the boy, break out of a multi-million-dollar containment cell not with brute force, but with cleverness. He had seen him run, injured and in his pajamas, towards a battle that wasn't his, and then he had seen him lead. He hadn't thrown a single punch. He hadn't unleashed that terrifying, world-breaking power. He had used his mind. He had analyzed, commanded, and coordinated 3 complete strangers into a perfect fighting unit. He saw their weaknesses and turned them into strengths. He saw a problem and, with nothing but his intellect and his courage, he had solved it. For months, Victor had been locked in this lab, a prisoner of his own resentment. His father saw his cybernetics as the pinnacle of scientific achievement. Victor saw them as a curse, a constant reminder of the life, the body, he had lost. He had walled himself off, focusing only on data and logic, because emotions were too painful. Power was a thing to be measured and contained, because his own power had cost him his humanity. But what he had just witnessed wasn't logical. It was inspirational. The boy, Izuku, willingly threw his broken body into the fray. He wielded a catastrophic power, yet chose to win with his wits. He was everything Victor thought was impossible, a being of immense power who was defined not by that power, but by his heroic spirit. Something inside Victor Stone, something that had been dormant since the accident, stirred. A sense of purpose. He looked around the sterile white lab, at the cold blue screens. This was not a life. It was a holding cell. Out there, on that dusty street, amidst the wreckage and chaos, that was where life was. That was where something new was being born. With a decisive, determined movement, Victor Stone turned away from his console. He walked to the door, his heavy, metallic footsteps echoing with a finality he hadn't felt in years. He didn't look back. The dust was settling. Izuku stood amidst the wreckage, his chest heaving. Adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. His arm throbbed in its cast. Beast Boy, back in his human form, jogged over, a wide, goofy grin on his face. "Dude! That was awesome! You were all do this! Go there!" And we were like, wham! Bam! It was amazing! Starfire floated down, her expression one of awe and a very alien form of gratitude. "Your tactical commands were most effective. You have my thanks, friend, Mumbling Pajama Boy, Izuku blushed. "It's, Izuku Midoriya. Or Deku." Before he could explain, the cloaked girl, Raven, solidified behind them, her presence a pool of calm in the chaos. She looked at Izuku, her violet eyes visible for a moment in the shadows of her hood. He felt a faint, probing presence in his mind, a gentle curiosity, before it retreated. It was her. The one he'd felt in the alley. They stood there for a moment, a strange and mismatched quartet. A battered hero from another world, a green shape-shifting runaway, an alien princess new to Earth, and a half-demon empath. A team of outcasts, a heavy, rhythmic clank, 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 made them all turn. Victor Stone walked towards them through the police cordon, which parted for him as if he were a force of nature. He was no longer wearing his lab coat. He stood before them, a titan of flesh and metal, his one human eye taking them all in. He stopped in front of Izuku. The name Cyborg, he said, the name sounding new on his own lips. He looked from Izuku to the others, a flicker of something new in his eye, not bitterness, but resolve. What you did back there, leading them. That was logical. It was the highest praise he could give. He looked at the chaos around them, at the defeated villains and the cheering onlookers. He looked at the four powerful, lost kids standing before him. This, Cyborg said, a slow, metallic smile spreading across one side of his face. This is more interesting than analyzing data streams. They weren't a team yet. They were a collection of broken pieces, of runaways and survivors and strangers from other worlds. But standing there, in the aftermath of their first victory, under the unfamiliar sky of Jump City, they had found something they had all been missing. They had found each other, and for the first time, for all of them, it felt like the beginning of a home. The aroma of greasy fries and cheap coffee was, to Izuku Midoriya, the smell of a fragile peace. They had found a 24-hour diner on the edge of the city, a relic of chrome and cracked vinyl booze that seemed to exist outside of time. It was the only place that hadn't immediately screamed and pointed at the sight of a 7-foot-tall cyborg, a green teenager, an orange alien princess, and a girl who looked like a living shadow. The night shift cook, a man whose face was a roadmap of long hours and seen-it-all apathy, had simply grunted and slid 5 menus onto their table. For the first time since his cataclysmic arrival, Izuku felt a sliver of something approaching normalcy. He sat with a notebook, procured by Cyborg from a nearby convenience store, open on the table, a half-eaten plate of chili fries pushed to the side. He was sketching, his left hand moving with a practiced, albeit slightly awkward, speed. He drew Starfire, annotating the drawing with theories on her energy projection. Source appears emotional, possibly tied to Tamaranian physiology. High energy output, but focus wavers under stress. Is it like a solar battery? Needs training in emotional control and energy channeling, not suppression. Across from him, Beast Boy was demonstrating the biological impossibilities of the teenage male stomach, having already inhaled 3 burgers and now working on a tower of pancakes. And then, I turned into a pterodactyl. Right over the police chief's head. He looked so mad, dude, it was priceless. He chattered, mouth full of syrup-soaked batter. Starfire, next to him, was tentatively poking a bottle of mustard. This yellow paste is most curious, she mused, her emerald eyes wide with fascination. On my world, such a color is indicative of a dangerous nerve toxin produced by the Gordanian sludge worm. She squeezed the bottle, and a jet of mustard shot across the table, narrowly missing Raven. Raven, who had been silently sipping a cup of herbal tea, didn't even flinch. She simply raised an eyebrow, and the glob of mustard stopped in midair, held by a whisper of dark energy, before dropping harmlessly onto a napkin. The Gordanian sludge worm is a delicacy on Korrigar, she stated, her voice a flat monotone. I read it in a book. Starfire gasped with delight. You are knowledgeable in the galactic cuisines. Glorious. Cyborg, sitting beside Izuku, had a holographic schematic of his own arm projected over the table. He was running diagnostics, his human eye watching the others with a quiet, analytical curiosity. My sensors indicate his current caloric intake is 340% above the recommended daily allowance for a male of his age and weight. It's fascinating. His cellular structure must be in a constant state of flux to accommodate the mass shifting. He looked at Izuku's notebook. You're doing the same thing, aren't you? Analyzing. Izuku flushed, scratching the back of his neck. Ah, yeah? It's a habit. Understanding how everyone's abilities work is the first step to working together effectively. It helps to maximize strengths and cover weaknesses. Back home, this was crucial for. He trailed off, the mention of home a sudden, painful weight in his chest. The silence that followed was brief but heavy. The others, for all their strangeness, were perceptive. They knew he was an anomaly, a boy who had appeared from nowhere with a broken body and a universe of sadness in his eyes. "This home of yours," Cyborg said, his voice softer than Izuku had heard it before. "Was it like this? The hero stuff?" Izuku nodded, a sad smile touching his lips. "Yes and no. We had schools for it. A whole system. There were rules. Rankings. But we also had each other. My friends." He looked at the faces around the table. A goofy green kid, a curious alien, a stoic empath, a man trapped in a machine. They weren't his friends from UA. They weren't his past. But they were his present. "It's good to not be alone," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. The moment of quiet camaraderie was shattered by a sudden, profound change in the atmosphere. It wasn't a sound. It was a pressure drop. The low hum of the diner's fluorescent lights seemed to dim. The chatter from the other patrons died in their throats. The clatter of cutlery stopped. Outside the large plate glass window, the streetlights seemed to bow their heads. A figure descended from the night sky, landing on the pavement outside with a silence that was more terrifying than any thunderclap. He was a god cast in primary colors, his red cape a river of blood in the neon diner lights. The iconic S shield on his chest was not just a symbol, it was a statement of absolute power. Superman. A moment later, a woman landed beside him, her grace that of a dancer, her presence that of a queen. She wore the armor of an Amazon, her lasso of truth gleaming at her hip. Wonder Woman. Izuku's hero-loving heart gave a painful, star-struck lurch. These were legends. Beings of impossible power and unimpeachable moral standing. He had seen their likenesses on the news reports Cyborg had shown him. They were this world's all might. Then, the shadows in the alley beside the diner deepened, coalescing into a shape. A third figure emerged, not with the grace of a god, but with the predatory silence of a nightmare. Armored in black and gray, his horned cowl cutting a terrifying silhouette, he was the specter of vengeance given form. Batman, the Justice League. The bell on the diner door chimed softly as the three of them entered. The air grew thick, charged with an ozone of pure authority. Superman's expression was calm, but his eyes, a piercing, impossible blue, held the weight of worlds. Wonder Woman's face was one of regal concern. Batman's was an unreadable cowl, but the grim set of his jaw spoke volumes. They ignored the gawking patrons, their focus solely on the booth in the corner. "Victor Stone," Superman began, his voice a calm, resonant baritone that commanded attention. "We've been trying to reach you. Your father is concerned." Cyborg's expression hardened. The faint, easygoing air he'd had moments before vanished, replaced by a wall of metallic indifference. "My father is concerned about his experiment. There's a difference. And the rest of you," Wonder Woman said, her voice melodic but firm, her gaze sweeping over them. "You possess great power. You displayed great courage yesterday. You also caused an extensive amount of property damage and operated outside of any legal or ethical framework." Izuku felt his stomach twist. This felt familiar. It was the Hero Public Safety Commission, but with the power to back up their edicts on a global, apocalyptic scale. It was Batman who cut to the heart of it. His voice was a low, gravelly rasp, a sound that promised pain and analysis in equal measure. He looked directly at Izuku. "You're the epicenter," he stated. It wasn't an accusation, it was a fact. The energy signature from your arrival was significant. Your performance at the bank was reckless. You and your associates are powerful, untrained, and unaccountable. That is a combination this world cannot afford. Izuku swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. This was Batman. The Dark Knight. The world's greatest detective. A quirkless man who stood among gods through sheer intellect and will. Part of him wanted to faint, to ask for an autograph, to show him his analysis notebooks. But the other part, the hero part, knew this was a critical moment. He slid out of the booth, standing to face them. He was painfully aware of his borrowed, oversized clothes and the cast on his arm, standing before these icons. "With all due respect, sir," he began, his voice trembling only slightly, "we stopped them. The HIV would have gotten away, and a city block would still be intact if you hadn't interfered in the first place," Batman countered, his gaze unwavering. "Good intentions don't rebuild banks. We understand your drive to help," Superman interjected, his tone softening, playing the diplomat. "That's why we're here. We want to offer you a place. A chance to train at the Hall of Justice, to learn to control your abilities under proper supervision. You can be heroes the right way." The offer hung in the air, heavy and laden with implication. "Our way." Beast Boy looked tempted. Starfire looked confused. Raven looked impassive, but Izuku could feel a wave of deep-seated distrust radiating from her. Cyborg's jaw was tight, the offer of supervision sounding too much like his father's lab. All of them looked to Izuku. In one chaotic afternoon, he had become their strategist, their leader, their spokesperson. He took a breath, his mind racing. He thought of the hero system back home. He thought of heroes like Endeavor, obsessed with rankings. He thought of the distance that had grown between the top heroes and the people they swore to protect, a gap that villains like Stain and Shigaraki had exploited. He saw the same potential for failure here, on an even grander scale. "Thank you," Izuku said, his voice finding its strength. "That is a generous offer. And we must respectfully decline." Superman's calm expression faltered for a fraction of a second. Wonder Woman's eyebrows rose. Batman did not move, but Izuku felt the intensity of his glare increase tenfold. "Decline?" Superman asked, a hint of disbelief in his voice. "Son, you don't seem to understand the danger you represent. Your power alone." He looked at Izuku, and for the first time, Izuku saw a flicker of genuine fear in the Kryptonian's eyes. "It's unstable. It radiates an energy that isn't of this earth. Power like that needs more than good intentions. It needs control. It needs limits." "I know that more than anyone," Izuku said, glancing at his cast. "But the kind of control you're offering, it comes at a price." He stepped forward, his gaze meeting each of theirs in turn. "Where I come from, we had a system like yours. The greatest heroes were symbols. They were powerful, they were famous, and they were distant. They lived in high towers and came down to fight the big battles. But they weren't there for the small things. They weren't there for the people who felt left behind, who were scared or lonely, the ones who fell through the cracks. And that distance, that's what the villains used to poison society from the inside." He gestured to the window, to the sprawling, imperfect city outside. "Being a hero isn't just about stopping alien invasions or fighting monsters. It's about being part of a community. It's about a kid being able to see you on the street and know they're safe. It's about earning people's trust, not demanding their obedience from a satellite in orbit." The shot was not lost on them. The watchtower. Their eye in the sky. "We can't wait for approval from a committee in space when there's a mugging happening down the street," Izuku continued, his voice ringing with a conviction born from 100 battles and 1,000 scars. "We can't be heroes who only show up when the world is ending. We have to be here, on the ground, every day. We have to show people that they're not alone. That's a different way of being a hero, and that's what we're going to do." A heavy silence descended upon the diner. Izuku had not just refused their offer. He had challenged their entire philosophy. Wonder Woman looked at him, her expression thoughtful, a flicker of something akin to admiration in her eyes. "His words have merit, Cal. Themyscira has been isolated for too long. We have forgotten some of the lessons of the world of men." "His words are naive," Batman growled, stepping forward until he was only a few feet from Izuku, his shadow seeming to swallow the boy whole. "You speak of community. I see a group of children with the power to level cities playing at being heroes. You are a liability. Unchecked, you will get people killed. This isn't a game. We know that." Cyborg's voice boomed, stepping up to stand beside Izuku, a titan of flesh and steel. "But we also know that sitting in a lab, being monitored and controlled, isn't the answer either. We're not lab rats, and we're not soldiers. We're choosing our own path." Beast Boy, Starfire, and Raven stood up from the booth, a silent, united front behind Izuku and Cyborg. Superman sighed, the sound full of a weary sadness. He looked at Izuku, a powerful, lost boy with a hero's heart and a terrifying power. He saw so much potential, and so much danger. "We can't force you," he said finally. "But we're warning you. Stay out of trouble. Do not make us see you as a threat. Stay out of our way," Batman corrected, his voice a final, chilling edict. And with that, they turned and left. Superman and Wonder Woman took to the sky, vanishing into the clouds. Batman melted back into the shadows from whence he came, leaving nothing but the faint chime of the diner door and a palpable sense of dread. The five of them stood in the silent diner, the weight of what they had just done settling upon them. They had looked God in the eye and said no. "So," Beast Boy said, breaking the tension. That was intense. "Anyone else want pancakes?" In Gotham City, in the echoing caverns of the Batcave, a young man sat hunched over the Batcomputer's auxiliary console. Dick Grayson, in the black and blue armor of Robin, had been monitoring the situation in Jump City for the past 12 hours. He had seen the energy spike of the new arrival, cross-referencing it with deep space anomalies. He had watched the security footage of the HIV fight, impressed by the raw power on display, and he had just listened, via a high-frequency comm link, to the entire conversation in the diner. Every word Izuku Midoriya had spoken resonated in his soul like a struck chord. Heroes who only show up when the world is ending, earning people's trust, not demanding their obedience from a satellite, being part of a community. For months, his partnership with Bruce had been strained. It was no longer a dynamic duo, it was a general and his soldier. The missions were colder, the methods more brutal. Batman was drifting further into his own darkness, demanding absolute obedience, seeing every problem as a nail to be hammered down with fear and intimidation. He spoke of saving Gotham, but he rarely spoke to its people. He was a creature of the night, a symbol, a ghost story told to criminals. He was not a part of the city, he was a force acting upon it. Dick had been chafing under the weight of it, feeling the joy of being Robin slowly being crushed out of him. He had tried to argue, to suggest new ways, but he was always met with the same grim, unyielding wall. "This is how it's done. It's the only way." And then this kid, this stranger from another world with sad eyes and a broken arm, had articulated everything Dick had been feeling but couldn't put into words. He hadn't just spoken to the Justice League. He had spoken directly to the conflict in Dick Grayson's heart. His way isn't the only way. The boy, Deku, was trying to build something new. A team based on trust and mutual support, not a hierarchy of command. A philosophy of heroism based on connection, not fear. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was everything Dick had been yearning for. He looked around the Batcave. A museum of victories, but also a tomb of obsession. The giant penny. The robotic dinosaur. The ghosts of his parents. This was Bruce's world, built on his pain. It was time for Dick to build his own. He stood up, his decision made. He typed a short, encrypted message and sent it to Alfred's private terminal. "I need to go. I've found something. Don't worry. Tell Bruce, tell him I'm sorry." He turned off the console. He walked past the rows of bat vehicles, past the glass case holding the tattered uniform of a previous Robin, and climbed onto his own custom-built motorcycle. Its engine roared to life, a defiant cry in the sacred silence of the cave. He didn't look back. He raced through the hidden tunnels, bursting out into the cold Gotham night, leaving the shadow of the bat behind him for good. He had a new destination. Jump City. The mood in the diner had soured. The victory of their earlier team-up felt hollow, overshadowed by the threat of the world's most powerful heroes. They were 5 kids in a booth, officially on their own against the world. "So what now?" Cyborg asked, the weight of their decision evident in his tone. "We just defied the Justice League. We're on their watch list. We have no base, no resources, no official standing. We will do as friend Izuku said," Starfire declared, her usual chipper tone imbued with a new, fierce loyalty. "We will be heroes for the people of this city." "Yeah, but where do we do that from?" Beast Boy added, his appetite finally gone. "This diner? The mustard is pretty good, but the Wi-Fi is terrible." Izuku was sketching in his notebook again, But this time he wasn't analyzing quirks. He was trying to figure out logistics, his mind a whirl of problems with no solutions. They needed a headquarters, somewhere they could train and coordinate. They needed equipment. They needed everything. The weight of leadership felt immense. A sleek, red and black motorcycle pulled up outside the diner. The rider dismounted with an acrobatic flair, clad in a costume of red, black, and yellow. A domino mask hid his eyes, but the confident smirk was unmistakable. The yellow R on his chest was as iconic as the S shield they had seen earlier. Robin pushed open the diner door, the bell chiming his arrival. He scanned the booth, his eyes lingering on Izuku for a moment before addressing the group. "Heard you guys had a little chat with my old boss," he said, his voice light but carrying an undercurrent of steel. "You're..." "Robin," Izuku breathed, his fanboy brain momentarily overriding his tactical one. "In the flesh," Robin said with a grin. He pulled up a chair, spinning it around and sitting on it backwards. "And I'm here because I heard every word you said. And you're right." He looked at Izuku. "For a long time, I've thought Batman's way was the only way. Fear, shadows, intimidation. But it's not. What you're trying to build here, a team. A family. Heroes who are part of the world, not just watching over it. I want in." The group stared at him, stunned. Another outcast had found his way to their island of misfit toys. "You want to join us?" Cyborg asked, skeptical. "You're Batman's partner," Robin corrected him. "I'm on my own now. And I come bearing gifts." He pulled a high-tech tablet from his utility belt and slid it onto the table. An image appeared on the screen, a satellite view of a small island just off the Jump City coast. On it was a single, massive, unfinished structure. It was shaped like the letter T. Jump City started a major communications and transit hub project years ago, Robin explained. It went bankrupt halfway through. The building is structurally sound, wired for power and data, and completely abandoned. It's isolated, defensible, and big enough for all of us. With a little work, and some funds from a trust one have that Bruce can't touch, we can make it a home. A home. The word hung in the air, full of a promise they all desperately needed. Izuku looked at the image of the tower. He looked at Robin, whose eyes shone with the same defiant hope he felt in his own chest. He looked at the others, Cyborg's guarded optimism, Beast Boy's renewed excitement, Raven's quiet consideration, Starfire's beaming smile. They weren't just a random collection of powered individuals anymore. They had a purpose. They had a new member. And now, they had a home. "We need a name," Starfire said suddenly, her voice full of wonder. "A team must have a name to rally under." "The Outsiders?" Beast Boy suggested. "The Misfits? The Pajama Gang?" Robin chuckled. "We'll workshop it." But Starfire looked thoughtful, her gaze distant. "In the legends of my people, there are tales of the gods, all-powerful and ruling from the heavens. But there were others too. The Titans, young, strong, and defiant. They were the ones who dared to challenge the gods." Her green eyes met Izuku's, and she smiled. "We are Titans." The name settled over them, fitting perfectly. It was bold. It was defiant. It was a promise. Izuku looked out the window at the T-shaped tower on the distant island, a dark silhouette against the pre-dawn sky. They had defied the gods of this world. They had found their own leader in a boy who came from the stars. And now, they had a name for their rebellion. They were the Teen Titans. And their legacy was just beginning. The Titans' tower was a skeleton of steel and concrete, a concrete promise against the sky. Wind whistled through the empty chasms where panoramic windows would one day be, carrying the scent of salt and the distant hum of Jump City. For the past 2 weeks, it had been their sanctuary and their training ground, a testament to their defiance. The main communal space, a vast, circular room at the apex of the T, was a chaotic collage of their lives. A corner was piled high with Beast Boy's video games and empty pizza boxes. Another held strange, crystalline Tamaranian artifacts that Starfire had procured from a crashed smuggling ship, humming with faint, alien energies. Raven had claimed a shadowed alcove, where stacks of ancient, leather-bound books stood in stark contrast to the high-tech schematics Cyborg had pinned to a nearby wall. Robin's array of training equipment, batarangs, grappling lines, practice staffs, lay neatly organized near the center of the room. And in the middle of it all was Izuku Midoriya, his notebook open, his brow furrowed in concentration as he diagrammed a complex team maneuver. Okay, so if we use Starfire's starbolts as a wide-angle dispersal to flush the targets out, he muttered, sketching frantically, Beast Boy, you can transform into something small and fast, like a hummingbird, to act as a spotter and relay their positions to Cyborg. Vic, you can use that information to calculate rebound trajectories for Robin's discs. Raven, you provide containment, creating a perimeter with your soul self so no one escapes the kill box. It's all about information flow and battlefield control. Their life had found a rhythm. Mornings were for training, a grueling regimen designed by Robin and refined by Izuku's obsessive analysis. Afternoons and nights were for patrol. They had become a familiar, if bizarre, presence in the city. The news reports, which once spoke of them with fear and suspicion, now carried a grudging respect. They showed shaky cell phone footage of a giant green gorilla gently placing a bus full of people back on a collapsing bridge. They had interviews with a shop owner whose store was saved from armed robbers by a flurry of starbolts and a well-aimed birdarang. They showed Izuku himself, his arm now in a lighter brace, using Black Whip not as a weapon, but as a net to catch falling debris from a construction accident, his face set with fierce concentration. They weren't just fighting villains. They were fixing water main breaks with Cyborg sonic cannon, rescuing cats from trees, a task Beast Boy took with the utmost seriousness, cycling through 20 different feline forms to find the right one, and simply talking to people. Starfire, with her guileless curiosity, had become a beloved figure at the local markets, while Raven's silent, watchful presence in the city's darker corners had an oddly comforting effect on those who lived there. They were doing it. They were building the kind of heroism Izuku had dreamed of, intimate, connected, and real. But as they fought the darkness in the alleys and on the rooftops, a different kind of shadow was beginning to fall over the city, one they couldn't punch or restrain. It started subtly. A billboard here, a poster there. A face, handsome and beatific, with eyes that seemed to hold an ocean of understanding. The text was simple: the power is within you. The logo was a stylized red H inside a circle. Brother Blood had arrived in Jump City. His message began as a whisper, an inspirational broadcast on late-night television. Izuku watched one evening, captivated and unsettled. Blood wasn't a fire and brimstone preacher. He was calm, articulate, and impossibly charismatic. He spoke in a voice that was a soothing balm, a melody of empathy and empowerment. The world tells you to look up for heroes, Blood said, his gaze seeming to pierce through the screen. They tell you to place your faith in gods from other worlds, in billionaires in bat costumes who hide in the shadows. They want you to feel small. They want you to be dependent. A screen behind him showed a montage of images: Superman flying high above Metropolis, Batman grappling onto a gargoyle, the Justice League's watchtower a cold, distant star in the heavens. But I am here to tell you the truth, Blood continued, his voice swelling with passion. The age of the demigod is over. The true power, the capacity for greatness, for heroism, for changing your own life, is not in the sky. It is in your blood. It is in your soul. You are your own saviors. Then, the screen behind him changed. It showed a blurry image of the Titans in action. Look at these brave young souls, Brother Blood declared, a benevolent smile on his face. The Teen Titans, they call themselves. They are a sign. They are the first rumblings of the earthquake of change. They have rejected the old ways, the distant authority of the so-called Justice League. They have shown you that the youth are ready to take control of their own destiny. They are a wonderful first step, but they are only that. A step. They still wear masks. They still hide behind secret identities. They still fight the symptoms of a sick society, not the disease itself. I invite them, and all of you, to take the next step. To join us at the HIV Academy and unlock the true hero within. Izuku felt a cold knot form in his stomach. This was brilliant. It was insidious. Brother Blood wasn't attacking them. He was co-opting them. He was framing them as his opening act, a precursor to his truer path. He was taking their message of ground-level heroism and twisting it into a recruitment pitch. Soon, the HIV logo was everywhere. Kids at the skate park wore it on t-shirts. Graffiti artists tagged it on walls. The Church of Blood, operating out of the newly established HIV Academy, began holding rallies that drew thousands. They offered free meals, counseling, and a sense of belonging to the city's disenfranchised youth. From the outside, it looked like a revolutionary community outreach program. The first real alarm bell rang for Cyborg. He spent a lot of his downtime online, his last real connection to a world of normalcy he felt he'd lost. He'd been talking to a girl named Maya in a forum for amateur coders. She was smart, funny, and deeply cynical about the world. She saw heroes as a joke and society as a rigged game. Cybernetic_Night 86, you should see these guys I'm with. They're the real deal. They actually care. Code_Queen_M, LOL, sure. Capes and spandex. Tell me another one. The world's broken, Vic. No one's coming to fix it. He'd been making progress, he thought. He told her about Deku's insane optimism, about Starfire's kindness. Then, a week ago, her tone had changed. Code_Queen_M, hey Vic, you've heard of this Brother Blood guy? Went to one of his meetings. It was different. He actually makes sense. Cybernetic_Night 86, Maya, be careful. That guy seems off. Code_Queen_M, you sound just like the establishment. Maybe you're not so different after all. He says the power is inside us. I'm going to a weekend retreat at his academy. Finally gonna do something for myself. That was 3 days ago. She hadn't been online since. Her accounts were all deactivated. Cyborg ran a search, digging through city records. He found her name on the enrollment list for the HIV Academy. He then ran a deeper search for others who had attended similar retreats. He found a pattern. Dozens of kids, many of them registered as latent or low-level metahumans, had essentially dropped off the grid after becoming deeply involved with the Church of Blood. Their families reported them as withdrawn, distant, their personalities scrubbed clean and replaced with a placid, unwavering devotion to blood. He brought his findings to the team. It's more than a cult, Cyborg said, his holographic maps showing the missing kids' last known locations, all converging on the HIV Academy. He's targeting kids with potential. It's a recruitment drive, but for what? For an army, Robin said grimly, crossing his arms. Charismatic leader, disillusioned youth, promise of power, it's a classic recipe for a paramilitary force. But the people, they seem so full of the joy. Starfire said, confused. When I fly over his rallies, I feel waves of happiness and hope. Raven, who had been meditating in her corner, spoke for the first time, her voice tight with strain. It isn't real. All eyes turned to her. She was paler than usual, her hands clenched into fists in her lap. I've been feeling it for weeks, she said, her voice low and trembling slightly. It's like a psychic hum beneath the entire city. When I try to meditate, it pushes back. It's a malevolent energy, vast and hungry. It wears a mask of peace and love, but underneath, it's foul. It's corrupt. She looked up, her violet eyes dark with a fear Izuku had never seen in her before. It reminds me of my father. The name Trigon was not one she used lightly. It was the ultimate evil, the shadow that defined her existence. For her to make that comparison meant that whatever Brother Blood was, it was a threat on a scale they couldn't yet comprehend. Starfire, Raven continued, the joy you feel from those rallies, it's a psychic projection. A manufactured emotion designed to lull you, to draw you in. He's feeding them euphoria while he's actually feeding on them. On their devotion. On their life force. Izuku felt a chill run down his spine. This was far beyond anything he had ever faced. A villain who fought not with fists or quirks, but with ideology and psychic manipulation. We have to do something, he said, his voice firm. First, we warn the League, Robin said, already pulling up a secure communication channel. This is beyond street crime. They have resources, psychics of their own. They need to know. The meeting was not in a diner this time. It was a sterile, holographic conference. The images of Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman shimmered into existence in the center of their common room, their larger-than-life forms a stark reminder of their power and authority. Robin laid out their findings concisely. The missing kids, the latent metahuman connection, Cyborg's data, and Raven's psychic analysis. There was a long silence on the other end. Finally, Superman spoke, his face a mask of careful diplomacy. Robin, what you're describing is a dangerous and manipulative cult. We are aware of Brother Blood. Aware? Cyborg scoffed. People are disappearing. We have an ongoing investigation, Batman's gravelly voice cut in. We have undercover agents in his organization. We have financial analysts tracking his money. And so far, he is clean. Every child at his academy is there voluntarily, according to the legal documents their parents signed. His donations are all legitimate. He preaches a radical ideology, but in this country, that is not a crime. Did you hear what Raven said? Izuku interjected, his frustration rising. He's a psychic predator. He's hurting people on a level you can't see. We heard, Wonder Woman said, her tone gentle but firm. And we have had Martian Manhunter perform a long-range psychic scan of the Academy. He sensed a great deal of unusual psychic energy, yes, but no overt signs of mind control or mental coercion that would violate any international accords. John described it as a form of mass hypnotic persuasion. Highly unethical, but not illegal. The Titan stared at the holograms in stunned disbelief. So you're not going to do anything? Izuku asked, his voice shaking with a mixture of anger and disappointment. We cannot act on feelings or suspicions, Batman stated, his voice cold and absolute. We are not judge and jury. We operate within the law. If we were to raid his academy based on the testimony of a psychic and a handful of disappearances we cannot directly link to him, we would make him a martyr. His movement would grow in power and legitimacy. The political and social fallout would be catastrophic. He is a social issue, not a supervillain threat. Our role here is to monitor the situation. If he makes a move, if he breaks a law, we will be there. By the time he breaks a law you can see, it'll be too late. Izuku shot back. How many more kids have to vanish before it's catastrophic enough for you? Your passion is admirable, son, Superman said, his voice laced with a paternalistic pity that made Izuku's blood boil. But your methods are reckless. You are too close to this. We are warning you, for your own good and the good of the city, stand down. Do not interfere with Brother Blood. You will only make this situation worse. The holograms flickered and vanished, leaving the five of them in the echoing silence of their unfinished home. The air was thick with impotent rage. Beast Boy kicked a stray piece of rebar, which clanged loudly against a concrete pillar. Starfire's hands were glowing, her fists clenched. Cyborg's red eye was narrowed to a slit. Robin was staring at the empty space where Batman's hologram had been, his expression a mask of cold fury. Izuku looked at their faces. He saw his own frustration, his own sense of betrayal, reflected in their eyes. The Justice League, the greatest heroes of this world, had just told them that the law was more important than the lives of missing children. They saw a problem to be monitored from a safe distance. The Titans saw people who needed to be saved. The ideological chasm between them had just become a canyon. So that's it, Beast Boy said, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. The big guns have told us to sit on the bench. What do we do? Izuku walked to the edge of the open-air room, looking out over the glittering expanse of Jump City. From here, the city was beautiful, a web of lights and life. But he knew, and now they all knew, that a rot was spreading through it. A rot that the gods on their mountain had deemed beneath their notice. He remembered his own world. He remembered how many times heroes had been bound by rules and regulations while people suffered. He remembered the feeling of helplessness, the burning need to do something, anything, even if it meant breaking the rules. He hadn't been pulled across dimensions to sit on the sidelines. He turned back to face his team. His friends. His family. They're wrong, he said, his voice low but ringing with an unshakable certainty. They see a legal problem. I see a hostage situation. And we don't leave hostages behind. He looked at Robin. You're the detective. You're the one who knows how to move in the shadows. What would be the best way to get inside the HIV Academy? To find real proof of what he's doing. Robin's grim expression slowly morphed into a determined smirk. The shadow of the bat fell away, replaced by the confident gleam of a leader. The best way to scout a fortress is from the inside. We need to go undercover. A new student maybe? Someone he wouldn't expect. Izuku then looked at Cyborg. Can you get us inside their systems? Find a layout of the academy? Security blind spots. Cyborg's red eye glowed brighter. They've got a hell of a firewall, but every system has a back door. Give me a few hours. He turned to Raven. You're our early warning system. You're the only one who can sense the real danger. We'll be relying on you to tell us when we're close to the truth. Raven gave a single, firm nod, her fear now channeled into cold resolve. Finally, he looked at Beast Boy and Starfire. We'll need a distraction. Something big enough to pull their attention if things go wrong inside. Be ready for anything. They all looked back at him, their individual frustrations coalescing into a single, unified purpose. The Justice League had drawn a line in the sand. They had told them to stop, but the Titans were just getting started. The League is watching Brother Blood, Izuku said, his green eyes flashing with the light of a hero's conviction. They're monitoring him. They're waiting for him to make a mistake. He paused, his gaze sweeping over each of his teammates. We're not going to wait, he declared. We're going to make one for him. They stood together, 5 young heroes in their unfinished tower, united in their defiance. The gods on their satellite had given up on Jump City. It was up to the Titans now. The heart of Titan's Tower had become the strategy room, a space once destined to be a server farm, now dominated by a massive, circular holographic table of Robin's design. Schematics of the HIV Academy floated in the cool blue light, a 3-dimensional ghost of their target. The air was thick with the scent of ozone from Cyborg's processors and the low hum of concentrated thought. Here, in the quiet hours before dawn, the Titans were being forged into something more than a team. They were becoming a weapon. Izuku Midoriya stood at the head of the table, a conductor orchestrating a symphony of burgeoning power. The Justice League's dismissal had lit a fire in him, a familiar, burning indignation that sharpened his focus to a razor's edge. He wasn't just a lost boy anymore. He was a leader with a mission, and his analytical mind, once a source of mockery, was now his greatest asset. Okay, let's run the simulation again, he said, his voice crisp and clear. HIV Security Patrol, Corridor 7. Beast Boy, you're on point. A holographic projection of the Academy hallway shimmered before them. Red dots representing guards moved in a predictable pattern. A smaller, green dot, Beast Boy, flickered at the entrance. Right, Beast Boy said, leaning over the table, his expression uncharacteristically serious. I go in as a rat, slip under the laser grid. Then, past the pressure plates, I turn into a spider, crawl up the wall to the camera's blind spot. No, Izuku countered immediately. It's inefficient. You're thinking about your forms as separate tools. You need to think of them as a fluid process. The moment you're past the lasers as a rat, you don't stop. You morph while moving. A rat becomes a flea in mid-scamper, using the momentum to land on the guard's boot. He carries you past the pressure plates. Once you're clear, you become a gnat, fly to the console, and then a mouse to chew the wires. No wasted movement. Every transformation should flow into the next. Beast Boy stared at the hologram, then at Izuku, his jaw slightly agape. Dude, I never thought of that. Morphing while morphing. A slow grin spread across his face. That's brilliant. Izuku gave a small, encouraging nod. He'd spent hours watching Beast Boy, not just in training but during his downtime. He saw the latent potential Gar himself didn't. The boy thought of his power as a list of animals he could become, a Rolodex of forms. Izuku saw it as infinite biological potential. You're not just a man who can turn into animals, Gar, Izuku explained, his tone earnest. You are the entire animal kingdom condensed into one being. Your power isn't the lion or the eagle, it's the transformation itself. Master that, and you'll be unstoppable. He then turned his attention to Starfire, who was watching with wide, attentive eyes. He changed the simulation, bringing up an image of a large, open courtyard filled with holographic targets. Corey, your turn. Objective: neutralize all targets in 30 seconds. Maximum power. Starfire nodded, her determination palpable. Of course, friend Izuku. She closed her eyes, and Izuku could feel the energy in the room shift. A wave of pure, unadulterated joy washed over them, so potent it made Beast Boy giggle. Starfire's hands lit up with a brilliant, blinding green. She let out a happy cry and unleashed a massive wave of energy that, in the simulation, vaporized the entire courtyard, targets and all, along with a significant portion of the surrounding building. The simulation flashed red. Fail. Excessive collateral damage. Starfire's face fell, the joyous energy instantly replaced by a wave of crushing disappointment. Her starbolt sputtered and died. Oh. I have failed. No, Izuku said gently. You succeeded at the first part, accessing your power. Now for the second part, control. He walked over to her, his expression soft. Tell me, what were you feeling just now? I was feeling the joy, she said, her voice full of genuine confusion. Robin has told me that my powers are fueled by my emotions, and joy is a most powerful emotion. It is, Izuku agreed. But pure joy is like a flood. It's overwhelming and undirected. A hero needs more than that. Think about your last real battle. Think about how you felt when you saw those people in the bank, scared for their lives. Starfire closed her eyes again. The ambient emotion in the room changed. The bubbly joy was gone, replaced by a sharp, focused energy. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was a fierce, protective instinct, the righteous fury of a warrior queen defending her people. It was colder, harder, and infinitely more controlled. A single, thin, pencil-precise beam of green energy shot from her fingertip. In the simulation, it pierced the dead center of a target's head. Another beam, then another. She moved with an elegant, deadly grace, each shot a perfect, contained burst of power, a star bolt guided not by explosive emotion, but by focused, razor-sharp intent. She cleared the board in 20 seconds with zero collateral damage. The simulation flashed green. Success. Starfire opened her eyes, looking at her glowing hands in awe. I understand. It is not about feeling the most. It is about feeling with purpose. Exactly, Izuku smiled. He'd seen it in her from the beginning. She wasn't just a powerhouse, she was a princess, a leader. Her emotions weren't a weakness to be controlled, they were a weapon to be aimed. His approach with each of them was different, tailored to their unique scars and strengths. With Robin, it was a partnership of equals. They would spend hours poring over the schematics, their dynamic a rapid-fire exchange of tactical theories and strategic counters. Blood's main chamber is here, Robin would say, pointing to the heart of the academy layout. Heavily fortified. Single entry point. A classic kill box. But it's also his throne room, Izuku would counter, his finger tracing a different path. It has to be ceremonial. That means there has to be a secondary, hidden entrance, for dramatic reveals, or a quick escape. Look at the power conduits. There's a secondary system that bypasses the main grid, terminating right behind the dais. It's probably hidden behind a tapestry or a false wall. Robin would grin, a look of genuine respect on his face. You would have given Bruce a run for his money. It was the highest compliment he could offer, and it filled Izuku with a quiet pride. Dick treated him not as a strange anomaly or a kid to be managed, but as a peer. The most complex and delicate training, however, was with Cyborg and Raven. They were the ones whose powers were most deeply intertwined with their pain. The training room was a cavernous space in the tower's foundation, reinforced with salvaged battleship plating. Today, it was just Izuku and Victor Stone. Cyborg stood in the center of the room, his human eye closed, his body rigid. His left arm was transformed, the plates shifting to reveal the white noise cannon nestled within. I can't do it, Victor said, his voice a low growl of frustration. Every time I try to interface with an external system, I can feel it, the machine, trying to take more. What do you mean, take more? Izuku asked, keeping his voice calm and steady. My cybernetics, they're adaptive. They learn. They want to optimize, Victor explained, his metallic hand clenching and unclenching. When I link with the tower's network, I can feel my own wetware, my brain, trying to offload processes to the machine. It feels efficient. Easier. It whispers that I don't need to feel tired, or angry, or sad. I can just be a processor. Pure logic. Pure machine. He opened his human eye, and it was filled with a desperate fear. I'm afraid if I let go, even for a second, I won't come back. That Victor Stone will just be a ghost in the shell. Izuku was silent for a long moment, processing this. He looked at Victor's powerful, intimidating form, and for the first time, he truly understood the man's bitterness. His power wasn't a tool he could pick up and put down. It was a cage he lived in, and the bars were slowly closing in. Show me, Izuku said. Interface with the training room's systems. And I'll be your anchor. Victor looked skeptical. What are you going to do? Hold my hand? Something like that, Izuku replied. He walked over and placed his hand on Cyborg's metal shoulder. Just focus on my voice. When you feel yourself slipping, listen to me. Victor hesitated, then gave a curt nod. He closed his eye, and a port on the side of his head opened, a thin blue data tendril snaking out and plugging into a console on the wall. The lights in the room flickered. Holographic targets sprang to life, and automated defense turrets rose from the floor. I'm in, Cyborg's voice said, but it was different. It was flatter, less human. System diagnostics are optimal. Threat response subroutines engaged. Vic? Izuku said, his grip on the cold metal shoulder tightening. You still with me? Affirmative. Victor Stone is present. However, his emotional responses are inefficient variables in the current combat simulation. The turrets opened fire, launching non-lethal energy rings. The cyborg-controlled systems moved with perfect, brutal efficiency. Shields appeared, deflecting every shot. The targets were eliminated with cold, mathematical precision. It was flawless. It was terrifying. Vic, tell me about your mother, Izuku said, his voice cutting through the noise of the simulation. Subject, Eleanor Stone. Deceased. Data is irrelevant to the current tactical scenario. Wrong, Izuku said firmly. She was a brilliant scientist, wasn't she? Your father told you she was proud of you. That you had her curiosity. Do you remember what she smelled like after working in her garden? That mix of soil and roses? There was a flicker in the system. One of the shields wavered for a split second. A turret's shot went wide. Irrelevant sensory data. The machine voice droned, but there was a crackle in it now, a hint of static. Remember football? Izuku pressed on, his own memories of a life before powers, a life with his own mother, fueling his words. The feel of the grass? The roar of the crowd when you made that touchdown? The look on your dad's face? He was there, Vic. He wasn't in the lab. He was in the stands, and he was proud of you. Not the experiment. You. The entire training system ground to a halt. The turrets retracted. The holograms vanished. The data tendril retracted into Cyborg's head. Victor Stone gasped, stumbling forward as if a great weight had been lifted. He leaned against the console, his breath coming in ragged chunks. His human eye was wide, shimmering with unshed tears. I could feel it, he rasped. I was drowning. It was all just numbers. And then I heard you. And I could smell the roses. I could hear the crowd. He looked at Izuku, a profound, gut-wrenching gratitude in his gaze. How did you know? Because your humanity isn't an inefficient variable, Vic, Izuku said softly. It's not a ghost in the machine. It's the pilot. The machine is just a tool. A powerful one, but it's yours to command. Your memories, your feelings, they're not weaknesses. They're your anchor. They're what make you a hero, not just a weapon. Cyborg looked at his metal hand, but this time, he wasn't looking at a cage. He was looking at a part of himself. He slowly, deliberately, interfaced with his own arm, not with fear, but with command. The white noise cannon retracted, replaced by a sleek, powerful hand. He flexed the fingers, a look of newfound control on his face. He had found a way to integrate, not assimilate. Izuku found Raven on the tower's roof, sitting in a meditative pose at the very edge, her back to the city, facing the endless expanse of the ocean. The wind whipped her cloak around her, but she remained perfectly still, a small island of tranquility in the buffeting air. As he approached, however, he could feel that the tranquility was a facade. The air around her was cold, crackling with a barely suppressed energy. Is it a bad time? He asked quietly. It is always a bad time, she replied without opening her eyes, her voice a low murmur against the wind. But your presence is less disruptive than the others. He sat down a few feet away, respecting her space. He didn't speak, simply sat and watched the gray waves churn below. He knew this was where their most important work had to be done. Raven was their key to understanding Brother Blood, but the deeper she delved into his psychic filth, the more it cost her. After several minutes of shared silence, she spoke. When I reach out to sense him, it's like dipping my hand into a sewer. It clings to me. His power is a perversion of my own. I use my soul self to understand, to connect, to contain. He uses his to dominate, to consume, to control. When I feel his mind, I feel my father's shadow. You're afraid, Izuku stated, not as an accusation, but as an observation. Her eyes snapped open, a flash of violet anger in their depths. I am not afraid. Yes, you are, Izuku said, his voice gentle but firm. You're afraid that if you push too deep, you'll see too much of him in yourself. That if you fight his darkness, you'll have to unleash your own. And you're afraid you won't be able to put it back in its cage when you're done. Raven stared at him, her mask of indifference cracking. He saw her not as a mysterious sorceress, but as a young woman carrying a burden that would have crushed anyone else. He saw himself in that burden, the fear of a power too great to control. One for all, Izuku said, deciding in that moment to share the secret he had guarded so closely. That's the name of my quirk. My power. It's not really mine. It's passed down from one person to the next, growing stronger with each generation. I'm the 9th user. Raven's eyes widened slightly. She was sensing the truth in his words, the faint psychic echo of the spirits he carried within him. When I came to this world, the connection was severed, he continued, his gaze fixed on the horizon. I couldn't hear them, the vestiges of the previous users. They were my guides, my mentors. Without them, the power was a wild storm, and I was lost in it. I was terrified. Not of the villains, but of myself. Of the damage I could cause. He looked at her, his green eyes filled with a profound empathy that cut through her defenses. Our powers are a part of us, Raven. But they aren't all of us. You think of your power as a demon you have to keep locked away. But what if it's not? What if it's just a part of your soul? A part that's dark, and scary, and powerful, yes. But it's still you. You're the one in control. Not your father. Not the demon. You make it sound so simple, she whispered, her voice laced with a bitter cynicism forged over a lifetime of fear. It's not simple, he admitted. It's the hardest thing in the world. But you don't have to do it alone. He held out his hand, palm up. Let me help. Let me be your anchor. It was the same offer he had made to Cyborg. Raven looked at his scarred, calloused hand. It was the hand of a fighter, a protector. She hesitated, a war of doubt and desperate hope raging in her eyes. Then, slowly, she reached out and placed her pale, slender hand in his. The moment their skin touched, Izuku gasped. He was plunged into a maelstrom. He saw flashes of a red, hellish landscape under a black sun. He heard the booming, demonic laughter of Trigon. He felt a tidal wave of pure, undiluted negative emotion, rage, fear, despair, hatred, crash against the shores of his mind. This was what she lived with every second of every day. It was a miracle she could even stand, let alone fight. But then, he felt something else. A small, defiant spark in the center of the hurricane. It was Raven's will, a tiny, flickering candle of gray light, holding back an ocean of demonic fire. It was the strongest thing he had ever felt. It's too much, a part of him screamed. Let go or it will consume you. But he didn't let go. He held on, and he pushed back. Not with power, but with his own essence. He poured all of his own hope, his determination, the memory of All Might's smile, the feeling of his friend's laughter, the unshakable belief in heroism, into that connection. He didn't try to fight her darkness. He just showed her his light. He focused on a single, powerful memory, standing on a beach at dawn, All Might, skeletal and frail, pointing to him and saying, "You too can be a hero." Raven gasped. Her eyes went wide as the image, the feeling, flooded her mind. Through their link, she felt his journey. The powerlessness. The yearning. The moment the torch was passed, the agony of breaking his body again and again, and the iron will that put it back together each time. She felt his self-doubt, his fear, but most of all, she felt his unwavering, almost insane, compassion. Slowly, the demonic storm in her mind began to recede. It didn't vanish, but it quieted, held at bay by the sheer, stubborn brightness of his spirit. When the connection faded, they pulled their hands back. Raven was breathing heavily, her face streaked with tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. The oppressive cold around her was gone, replaced by a neutral calm. I can hear myself think, she whispered, her voice filled with a stunned wonder. And then, Izuku felt a new presence in his own mind. It wasn't his own thought. It was a calm, warm voice, like a gentle hand on his shoulder. You have a good heart, ninth. A compassion that bridges worlds. It was Nana Shimura. His eyes shot open. He reached inward, and for the first time since his arrival, he felt them. Faint, distant, like voices at the end of a long tunnel, but they were there. The vestiges. His connection to Raven, a being who straddled the line between worlds, had acted as a psychic bridge, a tuning fork that helped him find their frequency. Nana? He thought, his heart pounding in his chest. We are here, Izuku, another voice said, this one deeper, more ancient. Yoichi Shigaraki. The passage weakened our connection, but we are still with you. This world's energies are different, but we are adapting. Your empathy. It stabilized the link. He wasn't alone. He had never truly been alone. A genuine, unburdened smile spread across Izuku's face, a smile so bright it seemed to push back the gray clouds. He looked at Raven, who was watching him with a new, profound understanding. They had both been anchors for each other. They had shared their scars and, in doing so, had found a new source of strength. They returned to the strategy room as the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The others were already there, a fresh pot of coffee brewing. The mood was different now. The frantic, desperate energy was gone, replaced by a quiet, steely confidence. They were no longer 5 individuals united by circumstance. They had trained together, bled together, and shared the deepest parts of themselves. Izuku had helped them understand their powers, and in doing so, had helped them understand themselves. He hadn't just given them strategies. He had given them hope. He had taken 5 broken, outcast kids and built them into a family. Cyborg now integrated his tech with seamless, human intuition. Beast Boy moved with a fluid, predatory grace. Starfire wielded her emotions with the precision of a master surgeon. Robin fought with a renewed sense of purpose, free from the shadow of his mentor. And Raven stood as a calm, contained bastion of power, her darkness now a tool, not a terror. Izuku looked at them, the vestiges a comforting chorus in the back of his mind. He was ready. They were ready. All right, he said, his voice ringing with the authority of a true leader. Let's go over the infiltration plan one last time. It's time to bring down Brother Blood.